During week number 2 of the trial, the tension was palpable in the Colleton County Courthouse as the jury heard shocking details and the court heard shocking details outside the jury's presence of Alex Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes. Now, although much of the testimony focused on the defendant's alleged embezzlement outside the jury's presence, the jurors did see key evidence in the double murder investigation that included a video taken on the cell phone of victim Paul Murdaugh that seems to place his dad at the family's dog kennels, which he said he never went to, just before the murders were committed. Let's take a look back together now at some of last week's most dynamic testimony.
Quick, Cash. Quick. Come here. Come here, Cash. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth. Bubba.
Hey, Bubba.
It's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Where was Paul when he called you?
He was at the dog kennels.
How do you know that?
I could hear the dogs barking in the original call.
Is he describing to you what he's seeing on Cash's tail?
That's correct.
And Cash was at the kennels?
He was.
Did you hear any other voices when you were on the phone with Paul about 8:40?
I did.
And what voices did you hear?
I heard Miss Maggie.
Who else did you hear?
And I thought it was Mr. Alec that I heard.
I decided to print a ledger printout of our system of payments to Forge. And as I did that, I started printing all the documents that would relate to those disbursements, the disbursement statements and the canceled checks. And as I started printing the canceled checks off, I could see Bank of America on the back and Alex Murdaugh's signature. And everyone that came out was just put it a little bit more in the grave for me.
I mean, the first thing I asked him is, Alec, what the F or what the H is going on here? What is going on, and have you done something else to me or that involves me that I don't know about? Because I know about this, and I've got to deal with this, but is there something else you've done that I don't know about that I need to be concerned with?
What did he say?
He broke down crying. Said I can't right this second. He went inside, came back out with some paper towels, and told me that he had a drug problem, that he was addicted to opioids, and that he had been addicted for, I don't remember if he said 20 or 20 plus years, but for 20 years or so.
Did he say anything about the money?
He told me that he had been stealing money.
Did he have a particular phrase about what he had done to you?
Yup.
Said he you up?
Yup, or off or something like that, but I think it was he me up.
He said that he admitted to you he had been stealing client money?
Yes, sir.
So he confessed that to you, is that correct?
He said he had a lot of people up.
Did you make a phone call to Alec?
Yes.
And what month was that in?
I believe the last time I talked to him was in June of 21.
June of 21?
Yes.
Around the time of the murders?
Yes.
And what did you ask him?
I can't believe what I asked him, but it was still making progress and be ready to settle, by the end of the year.
He told you it was still making progress and he was hoping to settle by the end of the year?
Yes.
Did he tell you that they had already gotten a settlement for $505,000?
No.
Did he tell you that they had already gotten a settlement for $3.8 million?
No.
You agree that your chosen field is part art as much as science, right?
Our field is an applied science, really. We do use lighting and angles to look at these features under the microscope, and it's important to know how to move those items around and move those lighting and those different stages on our microscope in order to see some of these markings. It can be difficult to do, and there is a special technique that you have to learn in looking at this and doing it and using that microscope to really become familiar and efficient.
Oh, to me, devastating evidence coming in last week, presented by the state of South Carolina against Alex Murdaugh. Let me bring in my guests and talk more about it. I have with me former senior homicide prosecutor Bernardo Villalona and Dr. John Delatorre. Okay, where should we begin? Bernardo, I want to begin with what might have been arguably the most damaging piece of evidence, and that is the video on Paul's cell phone that establishes that Alex Murdaugh was at the dog kennels when he said he never went there, and at the time he said he was in the house on the couch taking a nap. What does that do to his potential alibi, please?
It is devastating to his alibi because we have from Alex Murdaugh's own mouth. He gave an account of what happened that night, and in that account, he omitted to say that he was at the dog kennel. And why did he omit to say that he was in the dog kennel? Because that's where the murders took place. Alex was not counting and didn't account for and did not know that his son was filming a video. But aside from that, there's another Snapchat video that's also an issue, and that's the one with less than an hour prior, he's wearing different clothes. So the cell phone evidence that was presented last week was devastating for the defense, and I don't know if that is something that they can overcome.
That's a great point, Bernardo. You know, at that point, I know a lot of our courties on Twitter were saying, stick a fork in him, he is done after that lie, you know, because your wife and your kid are killed and you're not going to be totally truthful. I mean, at that point, it's like, whoa, you're asleep in the house on the couch. And by the way, all these shots are being fired in your yard. Guess that didn't wake him up either, if that story is true. Dr. John, want to bounce off of you a brilliant question I got this morning from one of my Court TV colleagues about Alex Murdaugh's opioid addiction. And my colleague was asking about, you know, why did we never hear about him resorting to shooting up heroin? And I said, well, you know, my guess is because he could afford not to. Talk to us about that. What are your thoughts on that, please?
I think earlier you said something about his truthfulness, and here's what I'm going to say. I doubt that someone can have 20 years of an opiate addiction and not go to heroin. It doesn't matter, you know, how much money that the person has. Clearly, he didn't have as much money as he thought that he did, or he wouldn't be involved in these financial crimes. But also the opiates, right, whether opioids or opiates, have devastating physical traumas that occur, right? Bone density declines, you lose a ton of weight. There are also some psychological issues, which none seem to be happening. I highly doubt that he went 20 years addicted to opioids and never went to heroin. I highly doubt that any of that. Now, he may have been taking them, but I highly doubt that he was addicted. But it's, once again, an embellishment of something that's going on in his life, something that's not exactly true, that he's trying to garner perhaps some kind of favor by the people he's telling them to, so that they don't think ill of him.
And Dr. John, I just want to be clear. Do you think that he's exaggerating the length of time of his addiction?
If he even had addiction at all. I'm not seeing any signs of someone that's had 20 years of an opioid addiction. I'm not seeing any of that. And yes, they absolutely would have gone to heroin. And money doesn't matter, right? It's chasing the dragon. It's chasing the high. I don't see any evidence of an addiction.
Well, you know, I have an interesting example, and this is one I learned just through an interview experience, but, you know, and I appreciate him being so forthcoming about it. I'm not sure if you both know who Kurt Angle is. He was an Olympic world champion, gold medalist, also really famous for working in WWE. Great guy. I've gotten to know him, you know, somewhat personally from interviewing him a couple of times and bumping into him when I lived and worked in Pittsburgh. And he's been very open about addiction and helping others battle addiction. And he said, Julie, the only reason I never resorted to heroin is because I could afford not to. And to still continue taking pills. I could afford to buy the pills because he was doing so well throughout his career, and because of his injuries, you know, went down that, sadly, that road of addiction eventually. So that's why I keep thinking, you know, this guy was making a lot of money. I mean, that law firm was making a ton of money. And so, you know, who really knows? But Dr. John, some of the signs you look for when somebody is battling addiction. You said you don't see any of those signs. What are those? What are some of the things that you think would be apparent, maybe physically, with him that might tell us whether or not he actually is suffering from an addiction?
Right, so someone who has at least 20 years, right, if we take this on, then they're probably going to have heart disease. They're going to have bone fragility, right? All the opiates sap all of the calcium out of you, right? They're going to have blood vessel issues. There are all different kinds of other neurological issues that they're going to have, so they won't be making appropriate decisions in terms of being sophisticated in their decision making and nuance in their decision making, right? Everything is just going to be kind of focused on numbing the pain that they are either allegedly or actually experiencing. So this person would probably come across as a bit distracted at times, particularly when they're on their medications.
Interesting. Yeah, appreciate it, Dr. John. Again, it's who knows, just like you said, who knows where the emotion's coming from, who knows if this is truthful. There have been a lot of, as I like to say, pants on fire moments with Alex Murdaugh so far in this case.